Felicitations, adventurers. Welcome to Over the Table. I'm Taylor Felicity, and I've scoured the internet, but mostly Reddit, for stories about TTRPGs for us to provide our unsolicited opinions, advice, and commentary. Today, I'm here with Jason and Mila, and we are going to be talking about Am I the Asshole Stories D&D edition. So we're here to judge, we're here to tell people that they're assholes or tell people that they're not assholes. That's pretty much that's pretty much the crux of it. I'm gonna put links in chat so you can check out my guests' other places where they may be. And I'm gonna throw it over to them to introduce themselves. And we'll start with Jason.
Hello, I'm Jason. I've been playing tabletop role-playing games for a long time. I've been playing 5e for about 5 years now, and I played a little bit of 3.5 in high school or college, but we didn't really know what we were doing. I'm a firm believer that good D&D games require a little bit of...
We've got cheering for you.
Thank you. Uh, I think that good D&D games require a little bit of antagonism between DMs and players. I think it's important that people feel like they're beating someone when they're playing these games. So
That explains
that's
so
the.
much, having played D&D with you.
I mean, there's a lot of asterisks on that, like,
Yeah,
oh, you
yeah.
have to make sure your players are on board, your
Yeah.
DM's on board, and that the vibes are right. But no, that is what I believe. So that's the lens with which I will be viewing these stories today.
I love that. Also, just so everybody else, Jason is very fun to play D&D with, but there is a lot of playful antagonism, which I also enjoy as a player, so it goes both ways. Mila, why don't you tell people about yourself and your viewpoint of, of
Yeah.
TTRPGs?
So I first played D&D and my first tabletop game in general when I was about 19, so it's been about a decade now. Um I do still really enjoy D&D, but for the most part definitely move towards indie games. I really love indie solo games. I'm currently this isn't as indie, but I'm currently running a Monster of the Week game that's Percy Jackson themed because I'm that gay person, and having a really good time. So that's the only thing I've run. I'm also in two, no, sorry, three, three D&D games and one Star Wars 5e game. So while I'm kind of moving away from D&D, you
You
would
still
not
play
know it.
you still play it a lot. Oh, Melanie. Oh no, Zavery. Zavery's booing. I don't know what specifically that you're playing so much D&D, I guess.
Four
Uh
games of D&D.
yeah. Melanie is canonically first in chat, so shout out to
Yes.
Melanie. You're here first and will always be immortalized that way.
Yes.
Um yes.
I will also say for my play style, it is very much a not a rules lawyer, but a how far can I push to get what I want.
mm-hmm.
I negotiate with Ethan, my DM, who DMs all of my games. Um, I I negotiate with him a lot. Sometimes I get what I want, sometimes I don't, but I always give it a shot.
Yeah, negotiation is key, I think. Cool. This episode is, like I mentioned, Am I the Asshole D&D edition. These stories are all about people playing D&D, getting mad at each other, and then taking to the internet for the judgment of Reddit to decide who's right. And now we're taking a crack at them. Sometimes Reddit gets it wrong, and so this is being escalated to our court of opinion. The three of us who are most qualified to decide on these things. People who are watching, you can submit your own stories for judgment, not for the stream today because it's too late for you, to be honest. But if in the future you want to have your stories considered by me and some guests, You can email them to rollforfelicity@gmail.com, or I also have a link that is to a Google form that you can use. You can submit your own stories, so things that have happened to you with TTRPGs that you would like people to discuss, or if you see something on Reddit that you're like, oh, I want to see what Taylor thinks of this, you can do it through that as well. And Xavery did clarify that she couldn't she couldn't do applaud twice in a row because I think I have a cooldown for it. So she had to do boo instead, which is really funny to be like a boo applause. It's kind of the same thing.
All attention is good attention.
All attention is good attention. So there are some things, before I get into reading the stories, there are some things that you can do in chat to interact with the stream other than just talking, which is also great. If you are a subscriber, which means if you pay Twitch to not have ads for this channel, you can use a command. Oh yeah, I was like, what is the command? If you put !red flag in chat, it'll have a little alert that comes up that says like red flag. So if you're like, this person that they're talking about is a red flag, you can do that. If enough people within a certain amount of time type boo or cheer in chat, it'll automatically set off applause or booing. So if like there's a consensus from everybody that like, oh, this person in this story sucks, and everyone's typing boo, then it'll automatically trigger a boo. But if you want to be like Xavery and just do it yourself, there is also a channel point reward that you can do to cheer and boo, and also use the red flag. So all that stuff you can do. If there's a moment that you think is really good that you'd like to see on social media, that's like, you know, that you don't want to make a clip of, but you're like, Taylor should make a clip of this, you can type !hey in chat or !marker in chat. That'll make a stream marker for me to come back to and make a clip of that moment, which is super helpful. And without further ado, I think that's everything that I need to say. I am going to continue to talk because I have to read these stories. But let's get into the stories. This first story is from r/D&D, and the title is, Am I the Asshole? Rules Lawyer, Me, Caused the Party to Fail. I'm that kid who reminded the teacher we had homework. We were infiltrating a castle to steal a rare relic, and rather than fight our way through the castle, we decided to cast Fly on the ranger, who would sneak in to steal it. There were too many enemies inside, so the ranger came out and suggested we create a diversion when he went back in. It worked. We drew out most of them who engaged us in a fight. The ranger stole the item and was flying back when the wizard failed a hold person from an enemy inquisitor. That's when I said, don't forget, Fly ends because paralyzed breaks concentration. Groans around the table. Really? You had to say that? The ranger fell 50 feet right in front of a dozen guards who saw him with the relic. He was promptly captured and taken back into the castle, and then we ended the session. Afterwards, the DM private messaged me, hey, you probably had good intentions, but I was aware of paralyzed ending Fly. I conveniently let it slide because I wanted you to succeed and you were so close. But after you said it, I couldn't ignore it. Another player PM'd me less nicely, hey dude, can you just keep your mouth shut next time? In my defense, if we had to cheat to win, it feels like an undeserved success. So yeah, what do we think? Is this person the asshole, first of all?
I don't think he's the asshole.
I also don't think he's the asshole.
Yeah,
Like,
go ahead.
Oh, I get why, like, I think the DM actually did it properly of being like, hey, like, I'm actively making some of these decisions. And I think that's a really good thing to remind, like, people of, like, sometimes, like, it's not really assistance. And also sometimes, like, I don't necessarily need that assistance. And so being like, oh, like, you know, you don't need to do this, I think is, like, a really fair exchange. I do think it's an asshole move to be like, dude, shut the fuck up. Like, I would also be like, come on, but I'd also be like, them's the rules. You're right. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Not the asshole.
Yeah, I've had players or like experiences where someone's called out a rule that the DM didn't notice, and then we yell at the guy, but it's always been like playful,
Yeah.
and we've definitely never left the table and still been thinking about it. I think the ranger falling 50 feet sounds hilarious, and then it's such a good cliffhanger. Like, if that's where they ended their session, they have time to figure out what they're going to do next to, like, figure out how to that person doesn't die. So I think, the party didn't fail per se. They just have new obstacles that
Yeah.
happened because of the rules.
Yeah, it's a story. Like, it's not like, while it is fun, like, I do agree. Like, I do enjoy being in like a more antagonistic like position, and I think it is really funny to make it into a you versus the DM thing in a joking way. Like, I have never been like, Ethan, how dare you? And meant it like seriously. Like, sometimes it will be like, how dare you do the sensible thing that makes sense for you to do with this character? But I've never been like mad at Ethan. And whenever someone has been like, oh, like this is like the rule, it's been like, "Oh, well, dang, we have to okay, well, I guess we just have to be more creative." Like, I think it is a little bit of like uh a mark of not being a very good player if you're like, "You have ruined us because of the rules." It's like,
Mhm.
"Well,
Because
you're
you
not
followed the
playing the
rules.
game then." Like like,
Yeah.
it is funny because I do think like, oh, like it's make believe with your friends that have rules on it, but like the rules are what make it fun. Because like if you go to the like playing with a kid where they're like, actually, I have a shield. It's like, well,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
kinda sucks. Like, well, what am I supposed to do now? And so it is really fun of being like, I like the rules. We're playing because of the rules. Play a different game if you want less rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think like I definitely don't think this person's the asshole because they're in combat, so they're going in turns. So I feel like saying don't forget fly ends because paralyzed breaks concentration is it doesn't even sound like they were like butting in and being like, actually you can't fly anymore. It sounds like they were saying like, if you have something you can do, like you're gonna start
Right.
falling soon.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's like wrong to do. I think that's like helpful. I think if there's a way this could be assholish behavior, like if someone's doing something on their turn and it's like cool and it's like kind of not the rules and it's like a different player and you're like, you actually can't wild shape into that. It's like, okay, let the DM worry about that. You don't need to like
Yeah.
tattle on people. But I personally think this is fine.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I think it was handled like literally like really well between the DM and the player of just being
Yeah.
like, I would prefer if you didn't do that. Like, okay, cool, like
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Thank you for letting me know. Now I know like where I like the boundaries, right? For the other person to come in, that other person,
Just
that
keep your
third
mouth shut.
person is an asshole.
So I think this is interesting too. Like Melanie also said the DM could always just be like, yeah, that's a rule, but I'm not following it, which I think would have been fine if during the session would have said like, oh, let's ignore it. Or I think someone in the comments was like, the DM could have had the wizard roll like an arcana check to see if they could maintain the spell, even though because it's like
Yeah.
this wild circumstance. Some people in the comments were saying, why did the DM cast hold person on the wizard if they didn't want the if they
That's
didn't
kind of a
want it
good
to
question.
fail.
That's a great question,
Um
actually.
yeah, so there's an edit to this that says DM's response on hold person. I cast hold person to add the feeling of stress to the situation. I was expecting the wizard to counterspell it. If I knew he ran out of spell slots, I wouldn't have cast a spell that would break concentration. That was my fault. So that makes sense, like, I guess, but I'm still kind of like, if you're gonna be casting spells, you
Yeah.
kind of gotta assume that they will work. Like,
Yes.
you can't just be like, oh, well, this won't work, so it doesn't matter what's happening.
Yeah.
um,
So
and
yeah,
then there was,
I
oh,
the
go ahead,
DM
Mila.
is the DM is wrong here. I'm ruling turning this into a completely different podcast show. I'm ruling against the DM.
You'll be using dungeon court rules for the
Yeah, I'm
entire
going that
the
going that
stream.
pod.
There's a second edit on this post that says, "Showed my group this post. The player who told me to shut up just left." So
That's awesome.
late breaking bombshell. Um,
Jeez, that
this
person sucks.
they turned tail and ran.
Damn. Fuck them.
This person also, I don't know if it was, I think it must have been them because they made the post. They made a poll of this. I don't know if a mod did it or if the person did it. But 12,000 people voted in this poll about whether this person did the right thing or not. The options were, I would have done the same thing as OP, I would have ignored it and direct messaged the DM afterwards, I would have ignored it, I would have done something other than the above, or just here for the drama. Do you guys have any guesses on which was the prevailing, which had the most votes?
DM the DM later.
I think
Is
just
what
ignored
I'm-
it.
The most people, about half, 6,000 votes for I would have done the same thing as OP. So most of the
Wow.
people in r/D&D who voted for this were like, I would have done the same thing.
I guess that makes sense because you got to look at the sample that we're
Yes.
sampling, and it's
Reddit-
people on
Reddit
r/D&D.
nerds.
People who
Reddit.
are looking up D&D stuff on the internet care about the rules of D&D.
Yeah, you know what? Great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. This next one is from r/Am I the Asshole. So it's just in the Am I the Asshole subreddit, but it's about D&D. And the title for this one is, Am I the Asshole for Making Contrarian D&D Characters? So, back in my early days of D&D, I made my way through lots of characters. Most fall into the against the grain type that seems my group did not appreciate. About 5 in total, as 2 died, 1 from an enemy, and 1 from the party killing him after a role was misinterpreted. 3 left mostly because the party just did not mesh well. A bard that was called a pseudo-bard because I wouldn't sing like a short bard from Critical Role. 1 was a cleric monk trying the, at the time, pacifist Unearthed Arcana, and the party always killed those he spared, making it clear he was sloppy and troublesome. That one also died to a friendly fireball when I was not present, but revived before you came back. The last was a monk that was from an apocalyptic future where the party was making every deal they could with the evil ruling faction, still expecting help from his resistance. Now, I feel like I may have been in the wrong, given it was one of my first games and I had new player syndrome. Other times feel like they just refused to mesh with any new types of play, given they were all way more experienced. So, leave it to you. Leave it to you all. Am I the asshole?
Yes. So the thing is I really like a number of these characters. I've been like, I really like that. The bard one who doesn't sing, that's actually very normal.
Yeah.
I think like in one of my games, the bard is a journalist. And I think that's really fun. And like, there's also like poets where you're not necessarily singing, and then also just in history, poetry and song gets really just intermingled. There's so many things that you can do that isn't singing, and I think that's really limiting a bard. So on that one, I disagree with the party. But the reason why I think he's the asshole, and I don't legitimately think he is, but if we're going with this very linear,
Yes.
binary,
No
he's
nuance
not-
here.
no nuance. He's not making characters that are meshing with the party. And that's why I'm ruling he's the asshole. Because like if he's seen that they are dicks to pacifists, they have a very like specific thing. They're clearly people who, maybe I'm being unfair with this, have only watched Critical Role and just really want to be Critical Role and not
Yeah.
realizing that like only Critical Role can be Critical Role. And so it's very like, yeah, I think he's the asshole because he's just not like, he needs to find a different party, quite frankly. But if we're looking at this very like microcosm thing, he is the asshole for not making characters that fit with the party.
Yeah. Jason, what do you think?
I like all his characters. I think that good D&D characters should have contrarian elements within them. So like an X meets Y type of thing where normally X and Y wouldn't mix. So I think he's making good characters. Um, I think, there's some details missing. Like we don't really have clear examples of like play between him and the other party members. If this is like if he's been through three parties with these different characters and everyone hates him, then he's definitely the asshole.
One party. It's one
Yeah.
it's one campaign, 5 different characters. Just for
Yeah.
just for clarity.
I don't really think he's the asshole. I think he needs to leave this party for sure. But I think he sounds like a more interesting person to play with than these people. So I'm taking his
Yeah.
side.
I fully agree with everything you are saying. 100%. I legitimately think that if he had come up with like, because originally when he said contrarian, I was like, great, a rogue or like emo angsty character who doesn't want to talk kind of like thing.
Mhm.
I think if he had made like one of those edgelords, my parents died and I'm sad and blah blah blah, I think that would have gone over better with the party.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
probably.
so too.
I do have a soft spot for this guy just because he doesn't seem to know Critical Role really, so he says I wouldn't sing like a short bard from Critical Role, which I just
Hmm.
think is so funny to be like not even say like this character or like a bard like it's short bard. I don't know who it is. um, Reddit said asshole for this one. Um, and Mila, so you're saying this person is an asshole on a scale of 1 to 10. Where do you think, like, with 1 being just kind of a little bit and 10 being like mega?
oh, like barely. This is you're the asshole. Like, he's not really an asshole. Like, but like if we're looking at him with this party and no other solution, I would say he's like 2. If he's just making characters that like aren't meshing, and if he wants to stay with that party, I think he needs to change his character creation style to just be shittier. Uh, he just needs to make bad characters, clearly, or
You're
find a
too
different
good.
party.
Make
You're
yourself
no,
worse.
legit from every like we don't. Jason's right. We don't have a lot of information, but from what we do have, his characters are interesting, and I would be interested in playing them. He
Hmm.
needs to make shittier characters that are less interesting and don't break the mold. And
Yeah.
these characters, I don't think, are breaking the mold.
No.
Thought has just been put into them, and they're
Yeah.
not ripping off one of the most famous D&D things in the entire world.
Yeah.
So yeah, like a 2. The
Um,
Yeah.
lightest of assholes. Please find a
yeah.
different group. You can do better.
Yeah.
I also think at this point he's been through 5 characters. I think his party just doesn't like him now. So like no matter what he makes next, they're gonna be like another shitty character from this
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
I think not only do I think he's not the asshole, I think his party is like full of assholes. Like not only do I think this guy's in the right, but I think everyone else sucks.
Yeah.
Like if he's playing a pacifist monk and they were like, "Oh, you spared an enemy because that's part of the storyline for your character you're exploring. We're gonna go execute them in front of you." Like that's so mean.
And
And then
also,
like
Yeah.
can't be an
killing him off when
XP
he's not
game.
there. What?
This can't be an XP based game. Like,
I don't know if it is or not. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're stealing kills.
Yeah.
He's not
Still
getting
steal.
any
he's a
XP.
level 1.
He's a level 1 character. That's like who's dying. I do want to say, Zavery, thank you so much for the gifted sub. Shout out to Peebs. Okay, so both of you were like, oh, this story doesn't really have like enough context. There's a lot more details I'd like to know. Well, bomb drop, everyone.
Uh-oh.
So this original story is from like 5 years ago. So I was like, I wanted to kind of get a little more in depth for some of these entries because I was like, let's see if they've posted about things other places. Let's see if they've like in the comments like clarified things. So I went to this person's profile, and we've been saying he. I think he is right. I think it seemed. I think I saw some stuff that seemed like it was a guy. looked to see, because I was like, I kind of cleaned up the writing a little bit, but it was pretty poorly written. So I was like, this person seems kind of young. Like, I wonder if they've like played more since then. It's 5 years ago. And I found that they had posted another story with much more information on RPG horror stories. That is the information about all of these characters and what happened with them. So this is a little bit of a long read because it's about 5 characters. I cut it down a little bit, but it has context, and I think it's interesting context. Yeah. So this one is titled My Dragon Taming Time Traveling Semi-Horror Story. This story is from my second ever D&D game. I played a bard. In my mind, he wasn't a singer, but a storyteller, mainly because I was in no way comfortable singing to a group of people. This is where the issues already started, as I began hearing about someone called Scandland Shorthall, which I do love that he gets the name wrong. Scandland. At this time, never heard of Critical Role, but out of the gate I was getting comparisons to this apparently legendary bard from another game. The game began, and for a while, outside of the constant pushes I should sing and not tell stories, it was all right. Until I went to inspire someone, and the DM told me I couldn't sing, or I couldn't unless I sang, a thing I felt I was clear on not doing. I tried bartering, asking for other options, but no, either you sing or you can't inspire them. That bard was ultimately dropped. Next came my shortest lived character, a gnome beastmaster. Him, I decided to play as a bit wild, poor social graces, etc., sort of an anti-bard, I suppose. It's here our spotlight falls on 2 of our players, the DM of the previous campaign's druid, and the current DM's significant other, who played another ranger. Now, there was a sort of joke around the elf ranger. We all called her an alcoholic, since without fail, every time we went to the slightest backwater of a town, her first question was always, "Where's the tavern? I need a drink." Everyone else thought it was great, but she would always get pissed over it. The joke was at best one secession when in a town. Now this girl, as soon as she saw my gnome, the first character in 2 campaigns to be a small-sized character, began to rip short joke after short joke. It was funny for the first 10 minutes. By the half-hour mark, the novelty was wearing thin, and I had said as much in and out of character. She kept it up, so I decided to really take the what would your character do type mindset. This is where I see as my asshole move came in. My guy, unsociable forest hermit that he was, decided to toss a dagger into the wall next to her head and try to intimidate her. The DM called for an attack roll. I got a nat 20 and listened as the DM told me how I threw it right into the ranger's shoulder. I said I wanted to hit the wall, and DM said something like, "Oh, well, it's out there, so can't take it back."
Yes, you can. Jesus Christ. It's a story. Hit delete.
Just say, "Oh, oops, never mind." The other 5 players dogpiled me and knocked me out. Yeah, we got boo. The other 5 players dogpiled me and knocked me out. 4 members decided to just tie me up and wait till I wake up. The druid, who was the DM of the previous campaign, the druid apparently had a 1-strike policy and proceeded to outright kill my character. The others told him not to, but did nothing more to stop him. I rage quit that session given I was dead in hour 1 and had no other characters lined up. Honestly, didn't even want to keep playing after that, but DM pulled me back in. Enter character 3. I was feeling a bit contrarian, and seeing we murdered any problem, including me, I went for a monk cleric that would be a healer and deal no killing blows, just incapacitate enemies. He did not last either at the time. As at the time I was working late, so began dipping out early in sessions. Had a lovely work day when I got the ping on Discord saying my cleric died from friendly fire after I relinquished control of him. It was fine, though, since they were kind enough to resurrect me in the end. That character left, not trusting the party anymore. so we're seeing kind of a different side of this so far. Character 4, the longest lasting one. Once more out of character ideas and thinking of leaving when the DM pitches me a gunslinger. No better ideas, I accept. He was a yes man and plain as white bread. He honestly was just extra damage in a fight. His main thing was he was there for the actual plot development. To make a long campaign short, here's the timeline thus far. Party finds dragon eggs and a dragon cult. Party hatches eggs alongside cult and keep the dragons. Party returns home thinking cult can't follow. After a lengthy trip to the Feywild, we came back to the material plane to find it in ruins, and we are all in the future. Turns out the cult did follow us back and proceeded to raise an evil dragon god to ruin the land and put dragons as overlords. The original party's dragons are all grown now, but only 3 are still good. My bard's dragon, I'm told, sides with the cult and killed my bard. I later learned that wasn't true, but still. So questing ensues. And not saying there was some bias, but the 3 with their dragons insisted we try to talk down all the evil dragons. It never worked, but they insisted every time. Meanwhile, my gunslinger gets killed by a lich. We're almost to the end. This is a long one, but we're almost to the end. Character 5 is the last attempt. It wasn't even the next day before DM was pitching me new ideas. I settled on a monk, but perhaps trying to get a personal story or just trying to passive-aggressively say fuck you to the party. I made him the leader of the anti-dragon rebels with a suitable edgy backstory. We met. The party was appalled I never gave those poor dragon overlords a chance to change, and tensions rose as they claimed our dragons are good, so other dragons can be good. I laid out a whole in-character explanation how I found it horrible they wanted to make peace with the dragon as they stood on a literal floor of its victim's bones. In the end, got a paraphrased, "No, you're the asshole" response, and by then I had enough. I left the game entirely after that.
Oh, good.
Good.
Okay, finally.
Good.
Jesus Christ.
Okay, yeah. Never mind.
Yeah, so how much of the asshole...
Yeah.
How much of the asshole is this guy?
Yeah, with more context, absolutely not. Like at first I was like, okay, like you're not making characters like based on like what's kind of vibing with the characters, the other players, but it's like he tried. Like it wasn't even a like, well, they just don't like get me. It was like oh, maybe this will work. Like this is different. Like maybe they'll dig this. And then just getting absolutely wrecked is insane. Like, oh my god, what a shitty party. It's also absolutely wild to me to be like, I don't know, imagine going up to like a warlord who, because human beings, some of us are okay, going up to them and being like, hey, you should really stop being a warlord. And then they shoot you, or they shoot your friend. And then you're still like, yeah, but I know some good people, so I think this guy can win. It's like insane.
Yeah. Jason, do you feel vindicated?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like I said, those guys all sucked.
Yeah.
And this guy, I hope he's found new people to play D&D with.
It seems like he has. This, like I said, was about 5 years ago, and most of his other posts are like other character builds, like ideas for characters that he wants to play, like stuff like that. And it seems like he is still playing. So, that's good. Yeah, rolling a nat 20 and then having it hit a character instead of hitting the wall that you were aiming for is like,
Yeah, it makes no sense.
that's terrible. DMing.
Throwing a knife at someone is obviously like very confrontational, but I am also just like, it is like there's a fine line between what my character would do, you know.
Mhm.
And I also think there's a level of like going in, if other people are constantly antagonizing you, at some point it does have to be like, you know, you have to make some hard choices sometimes.
Mhm.
When we were playing Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and I was like, I am very close to drawing a sword on someone who I shouldn't draw a sword on, but that is what they would do.
Yeah.
And like, I can't just be like, okay, like that's not a good story. That's not fun. Like,
Yeah.
me as a player was like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, and I think like there's a difference with like if you're in real life and someone throws a knife and it hits the wall next to your head, like that's crazy. But if you're in a story and someone is like making all these jokes about your character and you say, "Oh, I want to try to intimidate them by throwing a knife into the wall next to your head," everyone at the table knows that that character was not trying to hit the person or attack the person. Everyone at the table knows they're doing this cool thing that would be in a movie. Like, that's something that would happen in a movie, and you would be like, that person's cool. So for the DM and the party to be like, no, you hit the ranger, which we weren't trying to do, and then we're killing you. You've been playing for less than an hour.
Yeah.
Terrible
DMing.
I would be so pissed off.
I hate when someone says, I am trying to do this, and I roll a nat 20, and what happens is instead of that happening, it specifically doesn't happen. And it's like a nat 20 is to have what you want to happen as perfectly as it could happen. And that is, so, or like, if you're like, I'm going to throw a knife or something to do, maybe I'm trying to press a button and I'm trying to throw a knife across the room and I want to hit this button for whatever reason to get through this dungeon. And instead the DM is like, as you pull back, it slides out of your hand and it hits a player for whatever the damage is. I also think that's also shitty, because like that's not the goal is like you should lose the knife, or like there should be a consequence, not like you harmed someone, unless everyone is like, no, that's okay. But for the most part, I am just like, what you're trying to do fails as much as it could possibly fail. And so it's so frustrating when either way they're just like, I'm actually going to ignore what you want and do something different.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, I think if that player had rolled a 1 on that attack roll, the DM still would have had the knife hit the party member, because the DM, that's what they wanted.
yeah.
Yeah. I feel like any roll, it would have hit the person. Like, it doesn't really matter. It would have hit the person.
In chat, they're saying, wouldn't the harming of a party member be a bad roll?
Yeah.
And like it would be, but I would also say like that's not necessarily what you're like trying, like it's not really related to what you're trying to do in my mind.
Yeah.
Like, even if you roll a nat 1, it should be a nat 1 based on like what you are actively trying to do. So like if someone was trying to like use a knife to push a button, I don't know. That for me, that would be like your knife shatters and you don't have that anymore. Or like it like misses and like there's a cavern and it falls into the cavern. Like it is a like consequence. Or like, maybe you hurt yourself because like you failed in like throwing it or something. But when other people like bring in harm to other people when you're not trying to harm it, I think we can all agree that intimidation does not inherently also concern harm. It is like implied harm. And so for it to be like, I'm trying to intimidate them, I get a nat 20 on intimidation and I actually hurt. It's like, no, they need to, on nat 20, they think they're going to be hurt, not that they're going to be hurt. Grumble.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really excited when I saw that they had posted with more information. Because when I read the first, just the Am I the Asshole story, I was like, I think this person's an asshole. I think they're playing edgy characters, and I think they don't really know how to play as a team. And then I read the full thing, and I was like, oh, I actually completely changed my mind. I think I think they were in the right.
First, I was like, no, you are, like, I like this person. I'm on this person's side. Originally, I was on them, like, morally, but, like, in the context of that party, I was like, yeah, okay, you're not making characters that are, like, meshing, and that is, like, on you. And then we got more of the information, and I'm like, no, your party just fucking sucks.
Yeah.
Imagine if I had another story that was like this person, like a story of them not in D&D, but explains why everyone hated them. Like, it's like that would be a real plot twist. Am I the asshole for running over my friend with a car on purpose? Like, oh, that's why they all hate you. Okay, I've got another short story I think we can do, and then we'll take our break. This one is from r/RPG Horror Stories. The title is Am I the Asshole for Giving My Players Consequences? And content warning for this one for dismemberment. So maybe a hint at what the consequences are. This happened a year ago, but my player still brings it up and he's very salty about it. During one of our campaigns I ran, the player had a cursed bag of holding. Anytime he retrieved something from the bag, there was a chance the bag would try to take him instead. That fateful day came where I rolled, and when he reached into the bag, his arm felt a tug, and he was fighting the bag. The other players tried to help, but he was already elbow deep. Our bard then cast Dispel Magic at the bag, but because the other player's arm was halfway into a separate dimension, being pulled from the other side, I told him his arm popped off from the elbow down as the bag has now claimed it. He got furious and demanded that I retcon him losing his arm. The bard also said I was an asshole for maiming a player. I was guilted into just having his arm grow back. They've acted upset before when they didn't like consequences to their actions, but this was the first time they got actually mad. I was going to try to lead them to a priest who could cast Regenerate on him and do a small side quest, but that didn't happen. Did I go too far? Edit, for everyone who's asking, yes, they knew about the curse as they cast Identify on it beforehand. They just decided they could handle the curse if it ever came about. What do we think?
I don't think they're the asshole. I think, yeah, they gave them all the information. And
I
then
gave you
the
all
arm
the clues,
coming off
Mr.
thing,
Policeman.
the arm getting eaten was like, that was like an improv because of, their attempt at problem solving. I'm sure the DM had like some plan for if the guy got fully eaten by the bag, they would go on a quest to get him out or something. But instead, there was this compromise and he lost his arm, which I think is fine. And it's like, it's D&D, you can have characters without an arm.
Mm-hmm. He also, like, there was a plan, like, it's also, you can have a character without an arm, but we can also bring people back from the dead for a diamond, you
Mhm.
get engaged, you're set. And it's just like, yeah, Ugh. I don't think he should have compromised. I don't think he should have, like, I think the compromise of like the arm like getting like damaged is a fair compromise, but the giving in to them of being like, yeah, for sure, you can have your arm back. Obviously that wasn't, he didn't say yeah for sure, but I just,
He probably said,
yeah,
fine.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
fine, whatever.
Fine, whatever, you can have your arm back.
And like just being like, oh, like I don't want to go on a quest. I just want the consequences to magically not affect me anymore is dumb. Like that is part of the fun of you do something and there's a consequence. But it's not real life, which also has the same thing. And it's just, yeah, I don't know. I don't. And the actually getting mad at there being a consequence in an imaginary game is really like, and I say that I do want to recognize that like you do get really attached to these characters, and sure
Mhm.
you don't want anything to happen, but then now a priority is like, okay, well, like have been very wounded, I'm very maimed, and now a priority for me is to get my arm back. Like maybe it's a very vain character or something like that. Like I don't want this. And then you do some history checks. You go and chat to some people. You ask if there's like someone who's like a powerful healer, and then you go and get it. Or you talk to the DM and say, hey, like, I don't really want my arm missing. How can I get it back? Instead of just
Yeah.
saying, give it back. It's so wild.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
was actually gonna bum me out.
yeah, so a lot of the comments were saying this person was the asshole, which I was personally kind of surprised by, because I think if the players didn't know the bag was cursed and this was like their first time finding out that it was cursed and then this happened, I would be like, okay, did you give any warning signs? Like something like this happening really abruptly with no warning. I could see people being upset about that. But I think if the players knew about the curse and said, "We'll handle we'll handle it if it comes up," and then it came
Mhm.
Do it.
up, and it didn't go that well. Yes, so most of the people in the comments were saying like maiming a character is like a really serious thing that a lot of players don't like, so you should have talked to them about it first. Which, to be fair, I often think like stuff like that you should talk about in a session 0. Like, are you okay with your character being maimed? But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think this person's the asshole, and I think they could have explained to the players like this is temporary, like you're not gonna always not have your arm, like there's a side quest you can do to make them not mad anymore, but yeah.
I also, eh, I get being like a little bit emotional about it, and like I do understand like having like a reaction to it. I don't really understand like getting super angry at the DM and forcing them into something. Like it's not that I don't think that they should be upset or that they shouldn't have a reaction to
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
because like obviously your emotions are your emotions. But the way that they express those emotions is not chill. And like I think if they had just been like, "Oh, like I feel this way about it." And like I know talking about emotions is hard. So like this is also like peak expectations. But they should have just been like, "Hey, this makes me feel this way. I am not like super thrilled about this. Like, kind of like, what can we do?" And having it be a little bit more of like, well, where do we go from here? Like, this is something that like I'm not very comfortable with. Or like, even maybe like, could the bag have like actually like taken me? And like, we could do that. And then like, you're still like, if it's like the maiming
Mhm.
part that's upsetting to you, then you can like kind of fix that. But it also sounds like they're just upset about like the fact that they were warned, they were told, and then they had a consequence. And it sounds like based solely on the GM, they were upset about
Yeah.
the consequence part of it, and that for sure makes them the asshole to me.
Yeah, I think that like when you play D&D, which is a combat-based game, you kind of like enter a contract where things, physical harm might and will happen to
Yeah.
your character, and that, so not only were they informed of like the potential consequences, but like just by playing the game, you know that actions have consequences. And I just think there's like a really big difference between this guy losing his arm and then like the stuff that was happening to the player from the last story, where I feel like that last player was getting actively bullied like through
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons, whereas this is just they're playing Dungeons and Dragons and
Yeah.
the outcome is as expected.
Yeah.
Like the
Unless
character doesn't even
that
take the
character,
bite.
yeah, unless that character had a special attachment to their arm or something, like I
More
don't
than
really
most
get why
people.
we're so upset. Yeah,
My grandma's ring was on that hand.
Yeah, yeah.
it's still in the bag, presumably. It's still
Yeah,
in their
yeah.
possession.
They can still get it back. I also really like that the DM just described it as like it wasn't even very gruesome. It's like very cartoony. Like the arm popped off. It's just it's just like a
I'm also like,
Barbie
what does
doll or
that look
something.
like?
Yeah. Have either of you ever had so I think for this story, honestly, I think a lot would have been solved if when people started getting mad, everyone was like, let's just take 5 to 10 minutes and like walk away from each other and calm down and then come back and
Yes.
talk about this. Um but have either of you had times when playing like a TTRPG where like people have gotten like real life mad?
Did that make
I've
you
seen
mad in
it.
real life?
Yeah.
I've never gotten mad as a player or a DM, um, or maybe I have, but like internalized it and then let it go within 5 minutes. But I've seen
Yeah.
other people be like, "I'm mad," like, and then like kind of get up a little bit, pace around, and then sit back down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Managing your emotions, you know?
Yeah.
Like, again, like, I think people are allowed to be upset about it. I don't
Mhm.
fully understand it. Well, that's not true. So, in my Monster of the Week game, my players have been really mean to one of my NPCs, and it makes me feel a little bit bad because I am just like, what did she ever do to you? And so, like, as we're playing, I'm like, as that character, I'm like, what did I ever do to you? But then the game ends, and I think there's, like, a little bit of, like, how I was treated as a kid and, like, kinda, like,
Mhm.
seeing that and a little bit of, like, projecting, like, how I felt at that time onto this fake character I'm playing
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the almost big age of 30. And then after the like, I'm like, "You guys are so mean to her," and then I move on with my life because, again,
Yeah.
I'm 29.
Yeah.
And so for me, like, yeah, I do understand there are gonna be, like, people also use D&D as like a bit of therapy, and like
Mm.
people have this weird idea that escapism has to not involve anything bad to them, and
Yeah.
that's not the case. And so like I think the person who, like Jason was saying, like gets up and like walks around. I also I work with kids, and one of the things that like I try to teach them is like if I see that they're getting like a little bit heated, or like if I'm struggling to like come up with like a solution with them, or if I notice that I'm getting a little bit frustrated, I literally say like I'm just gonna go and have a drink of water, and then I'm gonna come back and we'll solve this, and like show
Yeah.
them, like I try to lead by example, that taking breaks when
Mm.
you're like emotional is actually good and okay. Of being like, we also like where the area that I worked in had like a little like nook, and we would use that as like the basically the calm down nook of like if we had kids who were maybe having like breakdowns or had like sensory issues, we'd be like, okay, like do you need to go and like just sit by yourself for a moment? And it's really helpful. And so I think like adults doing that is like a good thing.
Yeah.
But I also like when it comes to something of like I just want to have no consequences, it reminds me of a toddler being like, they need to share with me, but I don't need to share. And it's like that's fundamentally untrue. And like at least the toddler's only been alive for 2 years, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah. I have had one time that was like kind of recent in a home game where the session went kind of long. The players had just finished like 2 sessions of combat, and then they finished it, and I was expecting, like, I was like, okay, this thing is going to happen and then we'll end the session. But then the players started combat again against a different person that was, like, revealed to be bad. And so I was like, okay, this will be, like, 2 rolls. But then, like, everybody wanted to do stuff. And so what I should have done is just said, like, hey, let's, like, have it end with, like, this thing happening. We'll pick up next session and start the new combat. But I was, like, thinking it would be, I kept thinking, like, oh, this will be a second. This will be a second. And so it was basically like one of those situations where it's kind of like a wizard fight where it's like counterspell, I counterspell the counterspell, I counterspell the like a bunch of people had counterspell. And so I'm trying to like adjudicate like, okay, who has reactions, who can do this, what can this, because they're fighting a lich, and the lich has like had not used any of its spells, nothing. So it's like they're kind of in a rough spot. They've just got out of a huge combat. So I'm doing this stuff and saying like, okay, so you have to roll this and you have to do this and then this person can do this, and the lich like counterspelled a counterspell, and one of the players got really mad, but not, I thought they were mad at me, like that I was like doing something where it's like my bad guy can't lose or whatever. And so I got really like worried that no one was having a good time, but they were mad because the rules of D&D are stupid.
Right.
so so they got really mad and were like, I have to go, I'm getting mad, and just logged out of the call. Which was like, you know, fair, but I was like, oh, okay. Like, what? We talked about it after, and it's fine. Like, they were like, this is what was happening. I was really tired, and I was like, yeah, it's my bad for the game going on so long. So it has happened to me that somebody got really mad. But I think that's the only time. Jason, have you ever been mad at me in Monster Hearts? I just put you on the spot.
Hmm. Probably not. Well, oh yeah, I guess when you killed my dad, that was pretty fucked up.
Yeah, that'll do it. Wait, in game or out of game?
It was in game. She made me roll damage on my dad, which killed him.
No, okay.
My character wasn't attacking my dad, but she was like,
Yeah.
well, your dad's taking some damage, so you roll the die.
Yeah.
Well, she didn't tell me what it was for. She was
Yeah.
like, just tell me the number. And I rolled a high number, and I was like, I rolled high. That's good, right? And then she cackled evilly.
I did not. Okay, I did not
She said-
evilly. I went, ooh.
No, listen to me. She went,
Taylor, could we get your best evil cackle?
That's what I did.
it was just like that, yeah. And she was like, your dad's dead. Ka-chow.
I said, your dad's dead. Bazinga.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, that's fair.
I wasn't mad at you. I think you didn't laugh evilly, and you described the scene in a really sad, emotional way. It was just very good game playing. Um, it was upsetting though.
Yeah, well, that makes
Classic.
sense. Makes sense that
Have
it
you
was
ever been
upsetting.
mad at me?
No. I would say I've been cartoon exasperated at you.
That's a good way of phrasing
But
it.
I think that's fun. Mila, I know there is a time that you were mad at me.
Dang, I was hoping you'd forget, and I could be like, well, I've been mad at you, Taylor. No,
Yeah, do you
again,
describe
I
it
love
as I'm a villain, just like Jason did.
So we were playing this game, and I think because Taylor had already like done this setting before, I think she was like really sick of it and didn't actually really want to be doing it, even though it was her idea to do it. And so what happened was she just really hated my sorcerer, I think it was a gnome sorcerer. It was a
Yeah, you were
little kid.
really attached to this character, so you know
I
a
was
lot about
really
them.
attached to this character in this one shot that I played once and never again. And I poured my heart and soul into this sorcerer character that I just picked off a list of classes I hadn't been before. And we were playing, and like the first thing that Taylor does, knowing how low my stats are, was like, I'm going to try to frighten you. And I was frightened the whole game. And that is how Taylor wanted it to be. It was clearly premeditated frightening against me.
Yeah, and it was you. It wasn't even the character.
No, it was me particularly.
I
I
just
was
frightened
afraid.
you. I showed up at your house and went,
You went,
boo! You were frightened for the whole game.
I couldn't roll well then. My dice.
Yeah,
No,
I scared your
dice.
dice. I scared
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, exactly. No, even then, I think that was also more of a wow, damn D&D. Okay, I
Yeah.
will never stop being a scaredy cat, Mel. Don't tell me what to do.
Cool.
I do hate like anytime you get sidelined for like an entire session, like then I think
Yeah.
I do get like actively emotionally mad.
Yeah.
But usually like it's no one's fault. It's like the dice are just rolling bad or
Yeah.
yeah, you
I
get a
I think
condition.
actually,
D&D shouldn't have so many conditions that it's like you can't do anything. It's like
Mhm.
I think there should be other things, but there's like 4 different conditions where it's like, yeah, you're basically dead right now. Like you could be stunned, you could be paralyzed, you could be frightened sometimes, like you can't do anything.
Jason, you are actually wrong. There is one person who we can blame for this, and it is in fact Gary Gygax.
Oh,
Yeah. That's the real asshole.
I never made this game.
So I think we'll go ahead and take our break. But stick around because some of the other stories that we have coming up after the break, one is about a player inventing a new god. One is about a person who is forcing their player to participate in a TTRPG. And then we also have a story about a conflict over a gaming table. So all of those are things that we have coming up.
Cool.
So stick around for those. While we're on break, obviously, get a drink, get a snack, all of that good stuff. It'll be like 5 minutes. And also take the opportunity to follow these great guests on other platforms because the links will be in chat when we go to the break screen. And Mila is getting a snack delivered to them right on time.
That was awesome.
Do you want to say goodbye for now to chat?
Goodbye for now.
Goodbye
Goodbye
for
for now.
now. Felicitations Adventures, welcome to the second half of this episode of Over the Table TTRPG Asshole Edition. That's not what it's called, but whatever. So far this episode we've had mostly ruled people not the assholes. But we'll see how it goes in the second half. It would have been funny if I would have broken it up to like not asshole in my opinion first half and asshole in my opinion second half, but I I don't know if that's what it's going to be. We'll see. So I'm just going to get right back into it with this story from RPG Horror Stories, which is one of my favorite subreddits. You might be able to tell because I tell a lot of stories from that. This one is titled, Am I the Asshole? Tried to make up a god for my character's backstory. This happened a few months ago, but sometimes I think about how my friend group debated over the events and wonder if I was in the wrong. I applied for a Dungeon of the Mad Mage game in the DM's homebrew setting on r/looking for game. I was going to play an Earth Genasi light cleric named Gypsum, who was a cheerful and optimistic archaeologist. The DM had at the time mentioned that he had a pantheon, but it was still in progress, and he was planning to add more to it in the future. At the time, he'd only had 3 deities on his pantheon, Bahamut, Tiamat, and a chaotic neutral deity called the Hooded Man, or something like that. I thought to myself, well, none of these 3 fit the character I'm making, so I'll just throw an idea for a god together. I very quickly bullshitted a lesser god of discovery named Eureka, and wrote Gypsum's backstory from there. Oh, have you read this, Mila? so,
I also love RPG horror stories.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the details. I was just like, wait. So I'm
Yeah.
to revisit.
Yeah. I can't remember how old this one is. Some of these stories are pretty old. Some of them are pretty recent. Okay, so wrote Gypsum's backstory from there. I had missed session 0 because I had work that day, but the DM was chill with it and said we'd have a one-on-one session 0 later that week. A few hours before, the DM asks everyone in the server if his pantheon is going to really matter to us or our characters, and I realize I never mentioned Eureka, so I very quickly describe him. Minor god of discovery, his followers are usually scholars of some sort. That was all I had written. DM very quickly got angry, claiming that me writing a new god in his setting was wildly inappropriate. I very quickly got defensive and a little angry myself, demanding he at least work with me to see if this idea can work, because the other deities he had to offer weren't conceptually fulfilling to me. DM was genuinely appalled that I, a player, dared to add something of my own to his setting after he asked about it. I was very quickly booted from the server. One of the other players messaged me apologizing on the DM's behalf, saying that she'd vouch for me if I wanted back in, especially since she was desperate to not be the only woman in a game. I appreciated her offer, but knew I was no longer welcome at the DM's table, so I declined. A couple weeks later, I messaged her asking how the first sessions went, and was told that the DM had canceled the whole campaign before session 1, because a couple days after I was kicked, 1 or 2 other players chose to leave on their own, and the DM was complaining about everyone being difficult. Between me getting booted and checking up on the status of that campaign, I had told my friend group, whom I play with regularly, about what happened, providing screenshots of the exchange. The response was mixed. There were those who agreed and said the DM should have just worked with me and to see if my idea fit the setting of his. Others said that while the DM's response was a little extreme, suddenly asking him if I could just add a new god into the setting is a tall order, and I more than likely did overstep as a player by writing Eureka into my character's backstory. I see both sides of this, and while I feel I wasn't in any wrong, I wanted to get the court of public opinions on this. Am I the asshole?
Yeah.
I'm going to say no.
All right, I'll hear arguments from each side.
Okay, so the reason why I am correct.
Hmm.
No, I think that the only thing, I think the GM absolutely overreacted. I think that was not an appropriate method of going about it. I think you are, is that you didn't, like, I don't love that they went and they made a god and then were like, this is fine and I'm not going to talk to the DM about it until like the lack of communication, or like, I think communication should have been more of a priority when you're doing something like this. It is a game, but when he was like, and like, it is an improv game is what I meant to say. And while, I do think that I really like the idea of someone coming up with it, but I would also be irked if they like didn't, like, if they weren't like, hey, like, this is an idea that I have. Like, I would want it to be more collaborative, and they kind of did that where they left like a lot open, so it was kind of just like, this is what I want in like a deity, and then you like take it away. I don't know, I'm feeling like I'm less, I feel like I'm convincing myself internally that they're less of an asshole now.
On a scale of 1 to
Yeah,
10, what would you say if you do
like a
think that
one.
a 1, okay.
Like one. Yeah, very low key. I just think that like they should have been a little bit more of like, hey, I had this idea for a god before they got to session 0. Um like once they were kind of like, oh, this isn't really working for me, I would have been like, hey, I have this idea. And I think they could have gone about it a little bit more like communicate. But I also think that the biggest asshole was the DM. I think they were both. I think the player was like a little bit wrong. I think the DM is a giant asshole.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how big of an asshole is the DM?
Like a 9. Like for people to leave and then to still be bitching about how people are like difficult, maybe. It's one of those things where when you go out in the morning and you go through your day and everyone you meet is an asshole, you should probably stop and do some self-reflection.
Yeah. I'll now
Yeah.
hear arguments for the defense of the
Oh
OP.
I'm
yeah,
probably gonna agree with you again.
this guy's not an asshole at all. First of all, like the chat's saying, Eureka sounds like a super fun minor
Mhm.
god. Great name for a god of discovery. Just something that I think, any DM should be receptive to. Like if someone comes up with an idea that good, but like, it's maybe players shouldn't just make up gods to go into the DM's pantheon. That's fine. But this person, I think, did communicate in the proper amount of time. They said it was like a couple hours before their one-on-one session 0 with the DM. Like the session 0 is when you kind of hammer out finer details about a character, and the character's deity is one of those things. But it sounds like this guy, when he attempted to communicate to the DM freaked out before, and that caused the disruption in communication. So I think this guy did nothing wrong. The DM's gods that he put forth, like his pantheon, sucked. He used like 2 Forgotten Realms gods, and then just made up a guy called the Hooded Man. Like this sounds like a really bad DM.
Yeah, Melanie and Chaz, I think this is a woman because she mentions that one of the other players said they
Oh
wanted
yeah,
another woman at the table. Melanie is like, girl,
apologies.
Jason, girl.
I think this
I've been swayed. I
woman.
have successfully been swayed.
I think this chick is right.
I think yeah. This, wait, it's a girl. I'm switching. Switching sides.
Oh no.
This broad thinks she can make a god. What?
This broad.
Don't clip that. No, I think this girl
Oh,
is
no.
not the asshole at all, and the DM definitely sucks.
Well, I do have some additional evidence to submit on this one. Savory says the nerve on this dame. um, so she did end up posting screenshots of the conversation because some people in the comments were like, this doesn't seem like you're the asshole, but the fact that you showed your friends screenshots and they're mixed on it, like, they were like, I feel like there's some context that's, like, not here. So she did post the screenshots herself of the conversation, and I'm going to read the conversation between her and the DM. Starts with the DM who says, pings everyone on Discord and says, is the pantheon of this setting going to matter to anyone? Also, session 1 is coming up and I have not seen sheets nor backstories. Today would probably be the best day to ask questions and meet with me. If you need me or have a question, ping me. She says, I tried looking up a particular god that would fit my character earlier yesterday. Didn't find anything I liked, so I just kind of made up a god of discovery. Is that all right? Also, my sheet is ready. I just wanted to get some art on it before I sent it over. Blah, blah. That's not really that important. The DM responds, no, do not just add to the pantheon to my world. That's something you absolutely discussed with me before just doing. She says, last I checked, we were playing a Forgotten Realms game since this is Mad Mage, so I thought it wouldn't be a problem. The DM responds, you would be incorrect. We are playing a homebrewed Mad Mage. She says, well, your pantheon doesn't really have anything that fits my character either. He says, yeah, it wasn't finished. That's why I asked, so I could know what needed to be added and worked on. She says, I didn't even write a whole lot, just their name and what they represent. He says, Okay, but that's still not okay to do. You don't add to the world. That's my job in this game. If you have an idea, you can always run it by me, but to just do it, I'm trying to figure out what the appropriate response is here because this is highly inappropriate behavior. She says, calm down. The appropriate response would be to not make a mountain out of a molehill and instead try to work with your player. Instead of freaking out about something I made up on the spot purely as fluff for my sheet, you can instead see about how this could work in your incomplete setting that you decided to run. What do we think? Does this change anything?
No,
Yeah.
that's so
I
inappropriate.
think she's a little sassy, but like she's still right.
He's
Yeah.
also coming on so strong that I'm like, I don't even know how I would react to that.
I think, yeah, being told that this behavior is inappropriate that's crazy.
Yeah.
But also if someone told me to calm down, I would be upset at that too.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
they're both these people are a little more mad than they should be about this D&D game that hasn't started yet. And they're both
Yeah.
hiding it with like the best they can with the language they're using, but they're both beyond reproach at this point over something so small.
Yeah.
really. Go ahead, Mila.
Oh no, that's it. Yeah.
The screenshots really turned me around on this one because when I first read the story, I was like, I don't think she's the asshole. Some DMs are more protective of their world building and lore, so I understand a DM being like, don't just make up a god. Here's what turned me around on this that makes me think the DM is coming on a little strong. I do think she's kind of the asshole, and here are the key points of evidence why I think she's the asshole. One, the DM says, Session 1 is coming up, and I have not seen sheets nor backstories from anyone. Which I'm like, I would be mad at people if I was this DM. That it's like, we had the Session 0, no one has sent me their sheets or backstories. I would be like, come on, guys. I need something here. So that's point one, that maybe she's the asshole. Point two, which this is maybe a pet peeve of mine. She says, I just kind of made up a god of discovery. Is that all right? And he says, no, that's not all right. And then she gets mad that he says, that's not all right. Don't just make up a god. Why did she ask? Why did she say, is that all right, if she was going to get mad at the DM for saying, no, that's not all right? I think they're both kind of assholes. I think she's more of an asshole than she realizes, in my opinion.
I think that if someone was like, I can't, like, I think it might be the wording that, like, maybe also, like, sets him off a little bit. Again, his reaction is, I don't think, very appropriate.
Yeah.
Because, like, I do think that is actually an appropriate thing for a homebrewed game of Dungeons & Dragons, is to say, like, I would like a god of this.
Yeah.
But what she is saying too is like the wording that she uses is I came up with this god.
Yeah.
And so I do like, while I don't think he's necessarily like correct in like the level, I can also see him like I understand why he's defensive, even if I don't necessarily like agree with it.
Yeah.
I think if she said like, I had an idea, can we flesh it out? Is I think a little bit different than I made a god. Like it is like,
Yeah.
especially if like someone is like prone to being like defensive in this way, like I can see like why that didn't go over well, even though like I think his response should have been, yeah, let's like, what's your idea? Like, let's talk about it. Like, I'm not going to make like a promise that's going to look exactly like that, but like, let me see if I can fit it in. I will also say that like, it's funny because he's like, and like, I guess the difference is like, you have to have a character for session 1, whereas like if it's something that's not going to come up immediately, the DM doesn't necessarily have to have the entire world like 100% built.
Yeah.
It is funny of being like, I need this from you, but also like this other thing isn't fully done. But he did also say like, he is saying like, do you need this immediate? Like, do you need the Pantheon right now? Is kind of like what he's asking. So his reaction, I keep the assholey at a 9.
Mhm.
But I also think that I'm going back to like putting her at like more of a 1. And I think that might also just be a pet peeve of like, I'm also not like super vibing with the way she's communicating. Both of these people, if I was in this Discord, I would be like,
I can see why 2 other people left after this,
Two
because it's
people
like,
left,
this
yeah.
is
Yeah.
rancid. These are poor communicators.
Yeah, and I think like you're putting a lot of trust in people when you're playing a tabletop game,
Yeah.
especially one that like might have like more stuff, and then also too like we're also getting more into like discussing like mental health and like madness in games and kind of like what
Yeah.
that means as like kind of like a community in general. And so even if this is a little bit older, like I do think you are putting trust in people and you're putting trust in the DM to give you like a game that you kind of like want to show up to. So like
Mhm.
I do think like I understand why people would be like I don't love like the fact that he came with this energy for someone being like I want this in the game.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
also like yeah, it might just be me also like being like oh like I don't know that I would be like super like thrilled with someone saying like I made this. But it also, like, depends on the play style. Did you talk about, like, your play style? Like,
Yeah.
did all this background communication happen? Like, are you 2 on the same page? Because it doesn't sound like you necessarily are, and that's okay to leave a game for, but, like, yeah, the communication wasn't great. Like, I also, like, if someone this also might be, like, coming from, like, a bit of a gendered, like, background of, like, being seen as being more, like, adjacent to, like, the femininity, but whenever people, like, tell me or a woman to calm down, it sends my blood
She
pressure through the
she told him to calm down.
I know, but
Okay.
that's still like just like my reaction to anyone being like
Yeah.
calm down, I think is like
Yeah,
a little
okay,
bit
I see what you're saying.
heightened
Yeah.
because of that background. But it's also just like that's just like, yeah, he did overreact. And he
Yeah.
like honestly probably should calm down. But I don't know that saying calm down is remotely useful for him to
Yeah.
actually calm down. Like if you tell someone to calm down to be an asshole, not to be
Yeah.
helpful, you
Yeah.
know?
Agree. Yeah. Jason, did you already say if your opinion was changed at all by this additional information?
I mean, you basically said everything. Like her communication style is bad, and it seemed like she was pretty ready to be defensive if this person said no, which they
Yeah.
did. I still think that, when you're making a cleric, it should be kind of okay to like make up minor gods, but like if the DM says no, then you also kind of have to accept that or try and put forth reasons why they should say yes or ask questions why they're saying no instead of just saying, but actually, I think we should. Yeah, I don't know. I still think this DM's Pantheon sucked. It seems like he only has evil gods, so I think this just didn't mesh with the story he was
I
trying to
think
make.
Bahamut is good. Tiamat's bad, if I remember
Oh, okay.
correctly. So probably just good, bad, neutral, because maybe the hooded god
Oh,
is
yeah.
neutral. I don't know. I don't know anything about the hooded god. That might be an existing D&D god. I really don't know D&D lore.
That's still a very boring
Yeah.
pantheon. And I feel like they both had communication styles that don't mesh with the other person. Of him being like, well, do you actually like need more? Is like kind of how I took that. And it's like, well, yes. But also like she didn't phrase it in a very good like co-op way. I think they both suck
Yeah.
at like I wouldn't be happy communicating with either of these
They
people.
both took each other in extremely bad faith immediately. Like
Yeah, yeah.
immediately they
And
were
maybe
like,
rightfully so.
this person's out to get me. Especially because they didn't know each other before this. They like it's from the Looking for Games subreddit, so strangers to each other being like, actually fuck you.
Yeah. I feel very like listening to these stories, I just feel very lucky in the like parties that I've ended up playing with and how like, I've played with both of you. I've never met anyone online that like I didn't gel with once we were in game.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy to me seeing all these people play D&D with people that they don't like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bummer.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do the next story. Let me see what time. Okay, yeah, I think we have time for both these. So this one's pretty short. This one is another one from Am I the Asshole? And the title for this one is Am I the Asshole for Forcing My Player to Participate in a TTRPG? As stated in the title, I wanted to force my player to participate. He d- he d- he joined mid-campaign, and I introduced his character by placing him near the fight that was taking place, expecting him to join in, and that being the introduction to his character. He said that his character wanted to leave and go to the library to study his patron. I told him he couldn't, yet he seemed to be adamant about his character doing that. After an about 10-minute argument, I told him that if he wasn't going to participate in the game, he wasn't going to be at the table. He then left. Am I the asshole for trying to force him to play? And then there's 2 edits to this, which just add a little more information. The first one is for context. I had him introduce his character to the party before the session. The battle was to implement the character, not introduce. Poor wording on my part. Second edit, since I have seen many comments referring to this, the player had played D&D before, although I'm not sure the exact level of experience. So what do we think?
I think this is kind of like an everyone sucks here. I mean, the player being like, yeah, I'm gonna go to the library is so insane and so funny. But also, I do think like any DM should be like, fine, you go to the library and you can, and then it's up to the DM's discretion how much time they want to give that player compared to everyone else.
Yeah.
You know, you could be like, you go to the library and now you're sidelined,
Yeah.
rather than arguing.
Yeah. Like, and when it just gets to their turn, I get like you could put them like into the like initiative of being like, okay, well now we're gonna cut back and like check on
And
you.
you have 5
Oh.
seconds of studying.
Wow, it's like over the course. They're not actually in it, but that's just where you check in with them. Or maybe at like 0, so once everyone else is gone, it's like, oh hey, roll an investigation check. Okay, now we're going through everyone else. Okay, roll Arcana. Okay,
Yeah.
we're going through everyone
You're being
else.
way more
Okay.
generous than I would be. I would be like, you get
Okay.
1 roll for this because the combat is so much shorter than what you probably don't even get to the library before the battle is over.
You know what? That's actually a great point. Yeah, actually, I think you're more correct. I'm irked by the like I am a little bit of like was it communicated that this battle was like for the not introduction but the
Yeah.
inclusion of this character, because if the player knows that this is for them to get into the game and says nah,
No.
what the fuck? Also,
I didn't copy this comment, but if I remember correctly, I think the DM did say in one of the comments that they did talk to the player beforehand and said this battle is going to be the introduction of your character.
like introductions of characters are usually really heavy-handed and awkward. They just have to happen. You want them to happen nice and quickly so you can get to the actual like, stuff. And like I would love to like part of the problem is that the longer it takes, the more like separate you are, and that can be difficult for like a DM to basically be running like 2 games at the same time, or like, there's a reason why like don't break the party up is like a oft repeated like thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like a douchey thing to just be like, oh, you made this for me? No, thank you.
I'm going to the fact that it's the library is the funniest possible thing because
funny.
it's so boring.
It's
like
so boring.
I love libraries, but like being like, actually DM, I'm going to go to the library to study my patron. It's like, what you're playing a different game.
And like
I do think it's funny.
It's so funny. If the person was like, oh, like, this is how I want to be introduced. I really want to be introduced in a library because it's like a really like my character is like this. They should have said that when the plan became you're gonna have a fight that's for you. And like while I do agree that like you don't necessarily have to keep gifts, you should still say thank you as long as it's legitimately in like kind, like if it's in a kind manner, just say oh thank you and then move on with your life and donate it later, like I just that's so shitty. It's so
do we think the player is the asshole?
Yeah.
Kind of. Remember that time we were playing Wizard's House?
I was just about to say, Jason, do you know anything about a character being like, no, I won't be introduced?
My my character. So this was a game where we had played like 2 or 3 times before.
Hmm.
So our characters all knew each other, but mine had died the previous session, and Tig, the GM, was like, "Okay, you're gonna come back. You're gonna get revived this session. Uh, we don't have to figure out all the details, but I'll leave like at least a couple entry points for you to be able to come back into the game and rejoin the party." And I was like, "All right." And then the session started, and I just sat there not speaking for an hour and a half, ignoring every entry point.
And I was getting so stressed out as a player because I kept thinking like they planned a time for Jason to come in and we're not getting there. Like we're taking too long to get to the point where Jason's supposed to come in. And so I think
Oh
then
my
Tag messaged and said I
God.
told Jason he could come in whenever he wanted. Jason didn't come in until after the break. We played the whole first half.
I was
I don't.
waiting for the perfect entry point, and I found it in the second half.
It
God,
was a
that's
good choice.
so Jason to
Take in
do.
chat,
Everyone's
defending
everyone's
themselves.
in
Oh
the
my
chat.
God.
Uh,
Yeah, that video, I
Oh.
think I'm behind on YouTube uploads. So that's not on YouTube yet. I think it will be maybe next week. I have it scheduled. So cross promotion. Next week, check out that episode of Wizard Pals where Jason takes an hour and a half for his character to come in.
so I think maybe this guy, this player, had like a great idea for being introduced in the library, and that if the DM had just waited to see where they were going,
Yeah.
it would have been a good time for everyone.
This player was also playing a sandworm. It's mentioned later. Reddit ruled no assholes here, which I chalk up to the fact that this is in Am I the Asshole and people don't know about D&D that much to see that this is kind of a wild thing for a player to do. Do we think the DM's an asshole at all for for kicking this person out of the game after 10 minutes and being like you can't go to the library, you have to do the battle?
I think
Yeah.
I think the 10 minutes is actually where the DM's kind of an asshole, because I think it should have been like, "Oh, I guess you don't want to play. Do you just not want to play?" Like that could have been the conversation. But
Yeah.
arguing for 10 minutes and then booting them, that's too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't feel like this wasn't like it wasn't forcing him to play
Hmm.
because there's no indication that he doesn't want to play. It's
Yeah.
just that they don't want to play that way. And like I do understand the frustration. I think there should have been a little bit more communication about like how the character wanted to be introduced. Cuz like one thing could have been is like, "Oh, we need a little bit of information about this thing. We'll go into the library and like maybe one of the books is a mimic." Like there's things that like could happen that would be like good team building that would have like had maybe like a more fitting like introduction. For me, it's kind of weird that you agreed to do it from what it seems out of game. You agreed to do this fight. It was communicated that this fight was for your introduction, and you basically went, no.
No, I'm going to the library.
Yeah, I think the 10 minutes and the booting and not like having an actual like conversation is an asshole move. I think also being told, "Hey, this is how we're going to introduce your character. It might not be perfect, but we just need to introduce your character," is also an asshole move. So I think all assholes.
Yeah, I think everyone sucks
We're all
here.
assholes.
Yeah. All right, we are to our last story. This one also is just from Am I the Asshole? Jason, in case this colors your perception of the person, this is a woman who wrote the story. So, just,
Yep.
Got it.
so
All right.
see it
I
through
got
that
my
lens.
answer already locked in.
So this one is titled, Am I the Asshole for Refusing to Use a New Gaming Table When I Already Have My Own for a TTRPG campaign that I DM? Over COVID, I built a gaming table with an inlaid TV meant to be used with board games and tabletop role playing games. I'm a forever DM. It has lots of bells and whistles and works decently well, and prior I had very little woodworking experience. However, using it was near impossible as everything was done online, so my table just sat unused for years. Last September, I finally got a group together to play my campaign every other Saturday at my place using my gaming table. During the course of some sessions, I've come to learn some of the pros and cons from my table design and seeing what has and what hasn't worked very well, leading me to vocalize to the group that I'd like to make a version 2.0, learning from some of the setbacks from my current table. I also 3D printed their minis, monsters, and built our battle maps from scratch to be used on my table. A few of my players liked my gaming table and decided that they wanted to eventually build their own. Meanwhile, my friend offered to help me build my new table when I was ready. Until then, he and the other players had made plans to build their new table during a session break where I went out of town. After I got back, my friend announced that they finished the other gaming table and that it was ready for us to switch my campaign over to. However, this was all news to me. I didn't intend on abandoning my table to use theirs, but I wasn't even part of any discussion. When I brought this up, I was told that they'd been discussing that because their new table was better than mine, they collectively decided it would be better for everyone to play on. This honestly crushed me in a way that's hard to vocalize. When I pushed back that I was hesitant to do this, to now suddenly be expected to have to lug all of my equipment, minis, set pieces, etc., over to another house to use their better table, I had been told that I was being selfish. I do so much for them and work so hard for them to have an enjoyable experience, and I've never asked them in return for anything, and to hear that, it just hurt me so much more. Obviously, this wasn't entirely about the table. For me, it was about how quick they went to saying I wasn't doing enough for them. And the worst part was, if they had included me in those discussions, I would have tried to voice my concerns and offered to possibly gradually move that direction, but that was never the case. And now I'm self deprecating because the group has turned against me because I'm being selfish and crazy. They tell me now all of their hard work is going unappreciated because they built the table specifically to replace my own, which was news to me, without even considering my own hard work when I built my table by myself. Like suddenly I was just expected to abandon my own table. Am I going insane? Am I the asshole here? Everyone has turned against me, but I can't seem to wrap my head around as to what I did wrong in thinking this way.
Gaslighting his girl boss. Uh, no, I absolutely wild to be like, oh, we collectively decided. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You collective -1 decided.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the DM is still a player. What are you doing? And like to be like, just lug your stuff over. Like she doesn't say if they offered or not, so I'm going to assume they didn't. But like they're not even like they're just like you bring your stuff. And like I get that they worked hard on it, but no one actually like she didn't ask them to. And I also understand like if you're making things, if you're doing stuff and like you have like a workshop kind of area in your house where you make the minis and you make all of this stuff and you need the measurements and you need to try things out and take them away, that would make it so much harder to do. And so like if they expect, I think it's fair to say like if you expect this from me, I need this accommodation. Like I don't think that's a wild ask. And then for them to just be like, "Well, we decided." It affects her the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think being asked to change locations for where you play D&D is already such a big deal.
Yeah.
And then with like just them kind of, yeah, telling her in so many ways that her table isn't good enough and thus that like the work she put in isn't good enough is super shitty. Uh, and yeah, they just sound like bad, like an ungrateful friends. Like she
Yeah.
put in all this work and time, and like ultimately, and I don't always come down this way, but like the DM, the person who runs the game, should have like the luxuries of like not having to move. Like they get to host if they want. They get to
Yeah.
decide a couple of logistical things. Um, and yeah, these people, if they wanted to like make a gaming table because they thought hers was cool and they could make a better one, then they can play their own fucking D&D games with it. Like they don't need to force her to bring hers to them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think in the comments, some people asked, like, well, they said they were making the table, so, like, what did you think would happen? And she basically said, one of her players, one of the people who was involved in making the table, had talked about wanting to DM. And so she was like, I was excited because I thought this person was like gonna start DMing their own game and they were gonna have their own gaming table. And so she like gave them resources and like was like helping them to know what to do, or like helping them like know how to DM and stuff. So I think and I think in one of the comments too, she said something like, I don't, when I'm DMing, I'm not like resentful that I'm doing all this work. I want my friends to have a good time and I want to like, it's fun to make this stuff. But for them to say you're selfish when I am doing all of this stuff for their benefit, like, does hurt, which I think is totally fair.
The way that this isn't necessarily a good reaction. As much as I'm espousing like communication, it doesn't mean I'm necessarily practicing what I preach. That would be the fastest way to get me to be like, well, I didn't have as much time to prep because I was driving.
Yeah.
I'm only bringing what I need.
Yeah.
If you want your mini, you can come and get it from my house. I'm not doing
Yeah.
any of this stuff. I'm not logging stuff. I'll bring my books because I think that's a fair like expectation on like players if they need books. But I'm not doing more than what the players are doing anymore, you know?
Yeah.
Like, absolutely fuck that. I would just, yeah. Great way to get me to stop doing anything above the
Anything
bare
extra.
minimum.
And this could have been such a nice story because it could have been she went away on a trip, they made a new table for her and brought it to
Yeah.
her place. And even if it's like, hey, we'll use this table for now when I start GMing, like I'm loaning it to you, but we're playing at your house right now, so we'll bring it over. Like, that could have been a really nice gesture. But instead
Yeah.
it's like, your table sucks. we're come over to my house and still do
Like,
all the other stuff you're
so
doing.
hard on this, and you're being so rude about it. It's like, so did she. What
Yeah.
are you talking about?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I'm
this one
so
Yeah.
angry.
this one breaks my heart. I feel really bad for this
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
So what
Also,
level
like,
of
how much
asshole do
better
we think
can?
they are?
Yeah, none.
Negative. Negative.
Yeah.
Negative
Sorry.
10.
Jason, what were you gonna say?
I just don't think the table can be that much better than the existing table. I mean, it's a fucking table. Like, you can play D&D on anything. Um, like, unless her table was giving people splinters, like, who gives a shit? You know?
Well, it's funny you say that because I do have another update. My friend went to the hospital because they were covered in splinters from my gaming table.
Well, and like, so this made me think a little bit of the amazing Rick Perry and Dimension 20.
Mhm.
They keep their snacks behind them. Their coffee isn't on the table.
Yeah.
If it's good enough, if having limited space is good enough for Emily Axford, it's good enough for these people.
Yeah.
I'm kind of assuming that like might be the issue of like because I can only imagine that like to make it better it's like bells and whistles or maybe like a
Yeah.
different shape or something. Like I
Yeah.
wish she went into more detail or like shared a photo like of her table, but that would also ruin a level of like her players would absolutely recognize that one, even if they didn't recognize the story
Right.
somehow.
Yeah.
But it would have been nice to like get the different like specs of the table to like know what we're actually dealing with. Because like for me, like
Yeah.
a better table would be one that has more space. And I am just like again, like if it's good enough for professionals, it is good enough for you to have a little chair or a stand beside you for like extra bits.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, and yeah, there's a TV in it and cool spots to play and have like really awesome settings
Hmm.
and battle maps. Like at that point it just comes down to like it's better in preference because like I can't imagine how it would be like legitimately like intensely superior.
Yeah.
It
Yeah, I
is
think having a
ultimately
TV
a
in the
cool
table is
table.
having a TV in the table and like custom maps and all that stuff seems like pretty impressive. I wonder if it could be
Yeah.
like some gaming tables will have like phone chargers and stuff built into them, so I do wonder if it's like there are things that like aren't wired correctly, or like lights that don't work, or like space issues or something like that, which it's like, but it
Yeah.
doesn't seem like anything super intense. It just seems like the DM is like, oh, if I was doing another one, I would like change this or this, which I think
Yeah.
feel like everybody does that with projects. Like you finish something and you're proud
Yeah.
of it, but you're like, oh, I would like, if I was doing this again, I would like change this or that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Melanie says these friends in air quotes blow so hard, and they sure do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and yeah, and like impressive but not necessary. Like a lot of these for me are bells and whistles because like the
Hmm.
table is ultimately doing what it needs to do.
Yeah.
And like it's preferences and bells and whistles. And like that is important. And I think it's really cool that she's planning on making a second one and like improving her like version one, because just improving is awesome. Like getting better at doing things you want to do is excellent, fantastic. And for them to just be like, no, this is better, like feels like such. And again, I think like she's really, the thing that's really upsetting her isn't the fact that people are like, oh, this table's better, because for her she's like, well, yeah, you got to see my table
Yeah.
first. Like you
Yeah.
you
Hmm.
you had version one with no work. I did all of that work. But then for them to be
Hmm.
like, you're being selfish by wanting stuff that like, yeah, I think if you're DMing a game, you deserve, like, I think players should provide the snacks, you know? Like if you're like, I really want to play at my table, I'm running the game, rad, I will drive over and I'm gonna have a great time thinking and chatting about my character if I'm like driving with someone. Like I really like NADPOD and I've been thinking about it lately. But obviously I think about it all the time.
Yeah, I was gonna
But
say, when are
like,
you not thinking
yeah, I don't
about
know. Great
that?
question. Great question. But one thing that like I think it was like Jake or Caldwell was saying, where when they were driving to the Axmurf household, they're
Mhm.
like thinking about their characters, and a lot of the times like while they're commuting, they actually have like really good ideas. But like that's not like I don't know that like that would work for a DM or work in the same way like for like Murph, who like has all of these things and has all these books and probably has notes. I am Nadpilled, that is correct, Mel. And they are, I have taken the pills. Um I have,
D20
and
maxed and nad pilled.
and it's just it's so funny of being like, well, like, yeah, he probably has like a massive notebook or like sticky notes on the board and like things that are in different places to do.
Yeah.
Whereas like for like I think for a DM, it's a big web of how everything works. For a character, you are on like a storyline path. And so instead of having to be like, well, if they do this, this will happen. If they do this, this will happen. And it's more of like, okay, this happened. How would my character react to it? Is a very different like method. And so just to be like, yeah, you have to move and you have to lug all of your stuff would be like, I'm not lugging anything other than like what you guys bring. And
Yeah.
that's it. Like,
Yeah.
and I think saying I don't want to DM at someone else's house is fair and valid. I want to be nice and comfy and not have to think about like, where's the bathroom? You know, I just,
Yeah.
or like, I'm thirsty, I'm gonna go to my fridge and get a drink of like my
Right. Yeah.
soda, you know? Like it's just let the DM who works really hard have something, have their space. I think that's actually really, really, really fair. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, if they had DM'd another game, that would have been great. Like she seems so on board to be like, yeah, I'm gonna go to your house to play, but when
Yeah.
I run my games, I want to run my games. Valid.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like she absolutely seems like a team player, and everyone else is just being a dick. And it's so sad. Yeah, no, she's a -10 asshole, +10 on good person scale. And honestly, I legitimately, they're like a 9. They're like a 9 asshole to just be like, you're selfish after like she's
Yeah.
been so kind and like thoughtful about everything. 9. 9.
Jason, what do you rate the friends on the asshole scale on a 1 to 10?
God, well, what's like a 10? Is a 10 like, I don't know, an evil dictator from history, or is it just like a really bad friend?
I feel like this is the
Whole pot.
asshole scale. I feel like an evil dictator from history is beyond asshole at that point.
I
I'd be
feel like
like,
a
I
that's
see.
just
10 on the
evil.
asshole scale is a 1 on the evil dictator scale.
I see. I
Yeah,
see.
yeah,
I
yeah.
see. Yeah, probably like a 9. These are just bad friends, but I think we've all became a little like desocialized during the pandemic. Like some people just came out of that forgetting how to be good people to other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did look at her post history a little bit. This was a more recent post. I think it was in the last year or so. And she, Melanie, just said hot take. I think Mussolini was a bit of an asshole.
That
um,
is a hot take, honestly. To be like he was just an
he was
asshole.
just a little bit
Real
of an
hot take.
asshole. um, so
No.
I didn't see any more posts specifically about this situation. A lot of people in the comments were saying, well, obviously since she wasn't an asshole. A lot of people in the comments were saying like you should find a new like play with different people. Like these people don't really seem like they're appreciating what seems like a really good game, and you're doing all of this like stuff to like make it a really good game and a good environment. So I didn't see any specific updates about this. I did see that she had posted a like looking for players thing that was like, oh, my like every other Saturday game, like we've lost a few players, I'm looking for some replacements. So I hope in my heart of hearts that the people who are really pushing for table at the at a different place left or were kicked out of the game, and that maybe some of the players didn't understand the whole situation, or maybe like some of them weren't being as much of a problem. That's my hope for her, that, that she has a
Yes.
good table now. But it seems like she's still hosting it at her house, so
Good.
win for
Excellent.
that.
Good for her.
Uh,
That's the last story that I have for today. So, I think we can go ahead and go around and do plugs. And this time we'll start with Mila. What else do you have going on? Where can people find you? All of that kind of stuff. Starting
sorry,
with Mila.
I missed that first bit and then realized and then panicked slightly. Uh, Hi, I'm Mila. You can find me listening to NADPod, or over on Twitter. I'm also on Blue Sky, though I don't use it quite as often. I'm have projects in the work, perhaps. So that might be fun. I'm also planning on, I say this every single time, getting back more into streaming. And since I'm actually feeling good, I might actually go live later. So if you are interested in me
Ooh.
playing probably Hollow Knight, that might be a thing that happens later today.
Yeah, and actually, Mila's at for Twitch is in the video or the title of the
Yes.
stream. So you should be able to just click on that if you want to follow them over on their Twitch page, because they're great. Love Mila. Jason, what else do you have going on? Where can people find you?
Um, I'm Jason. You can listen to my podcast if you want. It's a movie podcast called The Over Under Pod, where me and my friend talk about movies that we think are overrated or underrated. Usually we film on this table behind me. That's why there's microphones there. You can find us on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts and stuff like that. I think it's just called Over Under Podcast or Over Under Podcast Show.
Yeah,
And
I
then
should have put the link to that in chat, but I I didn't think about it. I don't know why. I'll do it
it's
now.
okay. Appreciate it. I worked on a short film last year that a lot of these stories kind of reminded me of. It's called Roll for Friends. It was for the Philadelphia 48-hour film competition. It won first place. My buddy Dan directed it, and all our friends worked on it. And it's about a group of people who play D&D together, and they start to have less and less fun because the players think that the DM is overruling them a little too often. And like half of the film takes place at the table, and the other half we shot in the woods with like costumes, so you could see the players as their characters. It's really cool for like a 6-minute movie, so you should check that out.
It's really good.
Um, Thank you. Yeah, that's. I think that's it.
Yeah, definitely check both of these people out. Other places you can find them. Over Under is very fun. I listen to it, so join the Over Under listening community, and I can talk to you about what I think of. I'm gonna start another podcast that's gonna be called Over Under Reactions Pod, and it's gonna be
Huh.
me. Thank you, Xavier, approves of this.
Please have Melanie as a guest.
It's gonna be me and Melanie talking about whether that episode of your podcast was overrated or underrated.
All right.
So yeah, Melanie says I will co-host. As for me, you can find me online pretty much everywhere at Roll for Felicity if you're not already following me places. If you have topics that you think would be fun on Over the Table or guests that you want to see on Over the Table, let me know. If you have stories that you want to submit, you can do that. Let me actually just do this again. You can submit them to the link below, or if you have people that you want to see on the show, you can at me on Twitter, or topics that you want me to talk about, at me on Twitter for that too. I think that's everything. Do you two want to say goodbye to the chat and goodbye to the YouTube VOD?
Goodbye, chat. Goodbye,
Bye,
VOD.
chat and YouTube VOD.
Goodbye.